KiD. That's some 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 KiD. I see you. That's some KiD. 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 That's some KiD kid.
Okay, so principle number 1 is connection. And speaking of connection, we are going to start off, let's just give a brief summary of chapters 1 through 3. In chapter 1, we see Papa, this is Mr. Arable, and he is on his way to kill a little pig. This is the runt of the litter, and his daughter Fern jumps in the way. She grabs a hold of the axe and she says, don't kill it, it's unfair. And finally he goes, okay, I'm not going to kill it. Here, you can bring it inside, you can feed it, you can take care of it, but you're going to learn taking care of the runt of the litter is not easy. But he didn't know who he was messing with because Fern is Fern. And so Fern, she, as you can see in the illustration on page 6, I think your book may have the same pages. Fern, she takes care of this. She takes care of this little pig. She doesn't just take care of him. She gives him the name Wilbur. So she names him. And then as you move into chapter 2, we see her allowing him to do pig things. So this pig who was supposed to die, that was his lot in life because he was a runt. She looks at him and she connects with him. And she says, I want to give you the life of a pig. And so whether it's a little box that he can crawl into and sleep under the straw, or whether it's going with them while they're swimming and playing in the mud, she's not just bringing him back to life. She's saying, like, this is who you are and I love you for it. And then chapter 3 is where he's introduced to the barnyard. That's where he's moved. And once again, Fern is there with him. He starts to interact with some of the other barn animals that are there. He actually gets out and runs around a little bit. But that's where we're going to get into section 2, or principle number 2, which is community. Start to find a community. But what we wanted to focus on this first section is connection. And it's this connection that Fern has with Wilbur, even before she meets him. It's this injustice. It's the principle. She doesn't even know who he is. Right. She just knows that he's a runt and he's potentially going to die. It's this connection that she has with Wilbur that makes her dive into that situation and just connect to save his life. So there's a very clear purpose there. She's connecting with him. And so I think it's important as teachers to look at this particular situation, because you've got connection, and then with that connection comes attachment. And with that attachment then comes allowing that student to be part of the community. And you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about this. Connection actually starts with the kind of environment that you create in your classroom. I think you mentioned safety. Could you touch on that a little more?
Yes. Well, if a student has to feel safe before they can let down their guard and become part of the community. Mm-hmm. So just the very fact that a student can feel safe in your classroom, they don't feel threatened. They're not going to be embarrassed.
Yeah.
And an example, in teaching language arts in a high school is, depending on, what group of students you have, you might have a group of students who don't feel very confident about their reading ability. Mm-hmm. And as a high school student, you would not want to be called on to read aloud if you felt very threatened in that way. And that could lead to behavior problems, acting out, or constantly trying to escape the classroom and having the reason to leave the classroom.
Yeah.
Whereas if you know right up front when you come into that teacher's classroom, I always like to say, are there people in here who love to read out loud and can read with a lot of emotion and inflection? And if we read a play out loud, you'd like to read and have a part, and let those people volunteer. And then say, and those of you who know that you don't like to be called on to read aloud, please write that down on your index card the first day and let me know that you don't want to be called on to read aloud unless you know ahead of time. Like if I'm going to ask you to read a paragraph, you're going to get the paragraph the day before. You can practice.
Because just forcing that student to read can actually be a disconnection.
Exactly.
It can be you saying to the student, I don't care how you feel about this. I don't care about your insecurities. You're going to do what I want you to do, and you're going to read this out loud on day 1. It's not that we don't want them to read aloud. It's that it's establishing that safe place. It's saying, hey, I want to get to know how comfortable you feel in that. or in this before you start, doing it publicly and embarrassing yourself, being vulnerable with everybody. And so creating that connection there has to be like a place of safety, because there are students who don't come into classrooms feeling trust. They don't necessarily trust authority to do the right thing for them. And so to just immediately jump to connection, which you can do on topical issues, but to just immediately try to say, hey, I'm going to connect with you, you got to start with that space first. And on the topic of connection, I did want to tell the story because I thought it was really interesting. So you've got connection, and from connection, you've got like some degree of attachment, not parental attachment, but just attachment as a student, as a teacher student. But then also with that attachment comes this idea of being an advocate or advocacy. Like this is going back to the book, just like Fern, she not only raises Wilbur, but when it comes time to sell him, she plays an instrumental role in him going to her uncle's house. So she's now, because of that connection, because of the attachment, she's now able to advocate for Wilbur as he moves forward, which positions him to meet Charlotte later in the book. And if you would, I was wondering if we could just tell a little story together. So when I was in third grade, they wanted to test me for the gifted program. And what they did is when it was recess time, they pulled me away from my class. So I was going to recess, and then an adult came to me and said, you're not going to recess. Okay, that's fault number one. Then they took me to the library, and the library in that particular elementary school didn't have air conditioning. Fault number two in my eyes. So it was hot. Fault number three is that the windows to that library opened to the playground. So I was not only taken away from recess, but I had to take a test while listening to my classmates at recess. And so naturally, I did not want to take that test. I did not do well on that test. My priority was probably finishing the test as soon as possible, because in my third grade mind, as soon as I finished the test, I could go out there with everybody else. So naturally, I didn't do well on that test. But that's where I'm going to transition to you, because obviously we have a parent-child relationship, but there are also teachers involved. There was that connection, attachment, and then the advocacy piece of this. Could you speak to that?
Well, when Nathan did not pass the test for the gifted program, it was like the second or third year teachers had tried to have him on the list to take that test, and he hadn't passed, and they were puzzled by it. And I knew my son. I'm like, it's recess, it's hot, it's August or September, in Ohio.
Yeah.
The classroom is steamy, and he lives for recess.
Yeah.
He just wanted to go out on recess. And I said, yeah, I understand why he's not doing well on the test. And we talked about it a little while. And so the next time he took the test, he was retested, and they took all the students who were going to be tested, and they put them in an air-conditioned modular, and they gave them a Coke or a Pepsi or something to drink. It was like a reward.
Yeah.
They got to go take the test, and he blew the test away.
Yeah.
But, it was all about environment.
Yeah, and I know this from teaching that, how many kids have you come across that they get it's one and done? Like they take the test, they don't pass it, even for environmental conditions like that, where they're being taken away from recess, being taken away from specials. Then they go, oh, well, they just didn't make the program. Maybe they could try again later. Maybe they won't try again at all. And if that had happened to me, it would have transformed, in a negative sense, my entire educational experience. But because you were advocating for me and my teachers were advocating for me, because they knew me and what I was good at and what I could do, they allowed me to be in a room where it was air conditioned. There were no other kids in that room. It was me in an AC room with a can of Coke.
They probably just made you take it over.
They just had me take it over. And it was just like the most relaxing experience, sitting there sipping a Coke.
I can feel you.
Yeah. But that transformed, that one little act, that one little piece of advocacy transformed my educational experience. All that to say, as teachers, we're not going to see most of our students through for 12 years, especially if you live in a major city where students are going to a different school every other year. But what we can do is we can invest in them and we can advocate for them for the fraction of time that we have them. And that can be a catalyst for a life's worth of change. It can change their entire educational experience just from those simple actions that we take when we had them in class. But that all starts with connection. It all starts with creating a space where students feel safe, connecting with those students in very real ways. And we all know there are teachers out there who they don't know a student better on the last day of school than they did on the first day of school. They don't try to connect. It's just all about the content. It's all about the teaching. And it is what it is. But the beautiful thing about connection is that you make one connection point, and the next day you can build on that. The next day you can build on that, build on that, build on that, until those connection points become the foundation for your relationship. And you're able then to teach them anything you want because they trust you and because they're like, this person really cares about me. And so whether they're asking me to take a test today or whether they're asking me to do some creative assignment, I'm willing to do it because I trust this person. But that all starts with connection. And if you don't have connection, then, you can easily lose students, especially those students who struggle with disconnection from past experiences. So what we want you guys to do with this first principle is we want you to talk about this together as a group. So specifically, we want you to talk about what does it take to create a classroom environment in which connection is possible. And specifically, we're going to talk about community in the next section. What we want you to talk about in this section is what are the ways to best connect with your students? What are the ways to build that trust and that connection so that can move to attachment, and then that can move to even advocacy, to where you are sticking up for your students and you are you're doing what needs to be done to make sure that your students are receiving the educational experience that they need. And so it all starts with connection. So how well do you connect with your students? In what ways do you wish you could connect better? And just talk amongst each other as professionals. What ways do you connect with students? And just based on what your colleagues are saying, what ways can you connect in the same way that Fern connected with Wilbur, and in the same way that We'll Learn Charlotte connects with Wilbur? And just as an end cap to this entire conversation, since this is chapter 1 of our book, we will be referencing students as pigs and rats. But again, this is all referencing, we're alluding to our text. So we're using this as a metaphor. If we call a student a Wilbur or we call a student a Templeton, we're not calling them a pig, we're not calling them a rat. We're using the framework that E.B. White laid out in this book to consider the roles the different students play in our classrooms. And then especially when you're talking about Charlotte, the role that we as teachers play in our students' lives. So thanks so much. We hope you guys have some great discussion, and we'll see you next time.